Just hours after his long-awaited military discharge, Jungkook wasn't celebrating with balloons, cameras, or a welcome party. Instead, he walked into a quiet police station, alone, unguarded, and emotionally exhausted. And when he stepped out 6 hours later, the world was stunned by what they saw, his face pale, eyes swollen, and his body moving as though every breath weighed heavily on him. This wasn't the golden magne from the stage. This was a man carrying a storm in silence. He had gone to report what no idol should ever have to face, a home invasion attempt by a so-called fan, who wasn't just obsessive, but calculated. The individual, already labeled as a taehyung, had timed the break-in attempt to coincide almost exactly with Jungkook's return from military service. He wasn't home for more than a few hours before danger found its way to his door. Jungkook handed over everything: CCTV footage showing the figure loitering near the house, emergency hotline calls, voice recordings, and even detailed logs of suspicious activity. The evidence was overwhelming. This wasn't a moment of curiosity from a stranger. This was premeditated. The stalker knew where he lived. They knew when he was coming back. They knew he would be vulnerable. But perhaps even more heartbreaking than the invasion itself was Jungkook's own confession during the statement. Since the night of the incident, he revealed he hasn't been able to sleep in the dark. Every creak, every shadow, every click of the window at night jolts him awake. The fear isn't just in his mind. It's in his walls, in the air, in the quiet moments that used to feel like home. He doesn't feel safe. And worse, he fears for his mother's safety more than his own. That's why, even though his mother initially wanted to drop the case, to forgive, to move on, Jungkook said no. "There's no forgiveness for those who scare my family," he told officials in a chillingly composed tone. It wasn't anger that fueled him. It was love. The kind of love that draws the line not for revenge, but for protection. He's not pressing charges to punish. He's doing it to ensure no one ever dares try this again. Not to him, not to his mother, not to anyone in the industry. What left fans especially stunned was how he chose to do it. No staff from his agency accompanied him. There were no managers, no PR personnel, no bodyguards. Just Jungkook and a private lawyer. The silence of his agency has ignited speculation. Why wasn't a company that built a billion-dollar empire around BTS standing behind him? Why was he alone in one of the most terrifying moments of his life? Police have since granted his request for 24-hour security detail in his residential area. Patrol cars are stationed nearby. But the emotional scar is harder to guard. Jungkook, always known as the strong one, the composed one, now admits to feeling the kind of vulnerability that can't be cured with fame, money, or even law enforcement. In a rare written statement, Jungkook broke the fourth wall between idol and public. He didn't just address fans, he addressed lawmakers. He called for an overhaul of South Korea's stalking laws, arguing that celebrities aren't superhuman and they shouldn't have to wait until someone is harmed to be protected. His words were powerful and raw. "I don't want another idol to go through this. I don't want anyone's mother to cry at night, afraid to open the door." In court, when the taehyung appeared in person, crying and begging for leniency, Jungkook didn't flinch. Dressed in black, he sat silently, expressionless, refusing to look at the person who had shattered his peace. And when he spoke to the judge, his voice was calm, yet immovable. "This isn't about me. It's about drawing a line." The only moment that seemed to crack his composure was when he mentioned his mother. "If someone could get to me," he said, "they could get to her." That was the only thing that made his voice shake. Not fame, not personal safety, but the quiet terror of imagining his mother's name next in the headlines. Jungkook has always carried the weight of the world on his shoulders with grace. But this time, he's not singing a sad song. He's demanding a different kind of justice, not just for himself, but for every idol who has ever felt unsafe in their own home. And as fans rally behind him, a message echoes louder than any encore. This is not the end of innocence. It's the beginning of resistance. ChatGPT belong. And perhaps the most haunting part of it all is this: Jungkook never wanted the world to know. Those closest to the situation say he hesitated before filing the report, worried it would stir chaos, headlines, and hysteria. But after seeing the fear in his mother's eyes, the way she double-checked the locks every hour, how she couldn't sleep without keeping the TV on, how she jumped at the sound of footsteps in the hallway, he knew silence was no longer an option. He wasn't reporting for sympathy. He was reporting to protect. The investigation has since revealed that this was not a one-time incident. Authorities discovered that the perpetrator had been following Jungkook for months. Phone records, GPS logs, and digital trails show a disturbing pattern. The Sae-seeing wasn't just obsessed. She was patient. She knew the neighborhood, tracked delivery schedules, and even posed as a courier once to get closer to the door. When asked if he felt anger, Jungkook's reply was soft but chilling. "No, I feel cold. I feel like I'm still in uniform, still on duty, but now the enemy isn't on the battlefield. It's in my living room." Armies across the globe have taken to social media with messages of support, but also outrage. Has Korea done enough to protect its idols? Has the industry, one built on the public lives of young artists, failed to guard their private ones? Has HYB, the empire Jungkook helped build, done enough to stand by him when it truly mattered? For many fans, that question remains the most painful. Not once has HYB released a public statement about the incident.
No apology, no condemnation.
No plan of action, just silence. Deafening, sterile silence. And the fans? They've noticed. Hashtag #WhereIsHYB quickly began trending, alongside hashtag Protect Jungkook and hashtag No More Sae-seeings. The sentiment is clear. If agencies won't act, the fandom will. Petitions have started to demand the South Korean National Assembly revise privacy laws. Fan groups have even volunteered to fund private security around Jungkook's home. But Jungkook doesn't want a wall of cameras or a fortress of steel. In his own words, "I want to feel like I'm safe because I'm a person, not because I'm a product." It's a line that stays with you. A reminder that behind the glowing stages, million-dollar endorsements, and global records is a 27-year-old who just wants to sit in his kitchen without looking over his shoulder. A young man who returned from serving his country only to feel less safe than he ever did in uniform. And yet, even in trauma, he shines with a rare kind of grace. In the courtroom, when asked if he had anything to say directly to the perpetrator, Jungkook paused, looked down, and simply said, "I hope you find peace. But not near me. Never again near me." This moment was not just about justice. It was about reclaiming control. For too long, idols have had to normalize invasion, being followed, filmed, touched without consent, their families exposed. Jungkook's stand sends a clear message. The era of silent suffering is over. Still, the road ahead won't be easy. Recovery isn't instant. It isn't solved by a police report. Jungkook's psychologist has confirmed he is undergoing counseling to manage post-traumatic stress. It's likely he'll require support for months, but the boy who once sang about "Still With You" isn't walking this road alone. Millions stand with him. And perhaps, in this fragile moment, where fear and strength coexist, we are witnessing a new chapter. Not just for Jungkook, but for all K-pop idols. A chapter where no one has to smile through pain. Where silence is no longer mistaken for strength. Where idols are not just protected on stage, but finally protected at home. And as for Jungkook, he'll keep moving forward. Not because he has to, but because that's who he is. Not just an idol, not just a voice, but a fighter to a son to a survivor. And above all, a human being demanding the dignity he always deserved. And yet, after all of it, Jungkook never asked for pity. No Instagram post.
No li vestream tears.
No vague tweets fishing for sympathy. What he gave the world instead was silence. Dignified, wounded silence. And from that silence, fans heard more than words could ever say. They saw it in his swollen eyes as he walked out of the police station. They saw it in the way he clenched his hands when cameras flashed in his face. They saw it in the absence of his usual smile, replaced by something colder, older, and undeniably changed. Because this wasn't just a Sae-seeing incident. It wasn't just a breach of privacy.
It was a theft.
A robbery of peace, of innocence, of the sacred space every human being should be entitled to, home. The moment Jungkook stepped on stage again post-discharge, fans noticed something different. His voice, still flawless, now carried a heavier depth. His eyes scanned the crowd not just with joy, but vigilance. Every cheer, every flash, every sign was received with gratitude, but also with guarded awareness. And when he finally spoke to fans days later, not through press, not through HYB, but in his own words on a quiet Weverse post, his tone was clear. I'm okay.
Don't worry about me.
But worry about what we normalize. Worry about how easy it's become to hurt people in silence. It wasn't a cry for help. It was a challenge, a wake-up call, a subtle but searing reminder that idols are not invincible, and that every time the world shrugs off a stalker, excuses a privacy breach, or brushes aside an invasion because they're famous, they signed up for it. Another soul is forced to shrink just to survive, and now, the consequences are real. For the first time, South Korea's lawmakers are reportedly reviewing celebrity protection clauses. Behind closed doors, discussions have begun to introduce higher sentencing for stalking public figures, especially when family members are endangered. None of this would have happened without Jungkook stepping forward. Not with drama, not with spectacle, but with the quiet, unshakable power of truth. HYB, still criticized for its lack of immediate action, is now said to be internally restructuring their artist safety protocols. Too little, too late? Many think so. But the shift is undeniable, and it began the moment Jungkook walked into that station by himself. There's a photo from that night. Jungkook under the streetlights had lowered, hoodie up, with just a lawyer beside him, and entourage. No manager, no flashing HYB logo, just a young man deciding that enough was enough. And perhaps that's what makes this moment historic. Not the lawsuit, not the news coverage, but the fact that, for once, the strongest voice in the room wasn't shouting, IT was simply standing, unshaken, unforgiving, unafraid. And now, the industry will have no choice but to follow.